Suddenly, the whole world turned into a frozen wasteland. Outside, the temperature has settled at a biting -60 degrees Celsius, turning this frozen part of South Korea into a harsh world where warmth and food are the only things that truly matter. The survivors tried to stick together at first, but soon they saw there wasn't enough food or water for all of them. Then a fierce fight erupted down in the chilly hallways of the apartment buildings. But in the middle of all this mess, there's Hangfong, a fearless guy who's safe in his base with plenty of heat, girls, and food. He traveled back in time before the world ended to get ready, and he even found superpowers that let him clone food and make it grow huge. He didn't stop there. Instead, he built a real fortress complete with a heat room, greenhouses, and even a sauna. But how did it all start? Let's find out. The transmission suddenly dies, leaving only the loud, angry shout of someone calling for Hanfong. The guy shivers from the cold as he makes his way to open the door. Peeking through the small hole, he finds it's actually his crush, Hyona, shivering from the cold and barely able to speak. He throws open the door without a second thought to check on her and pulls her inside right away. Suddenly, Hona jumps up to kiss him, leaving Hanfong stunned and amazed. She's pouring her heart into that kiss until he's totally speechless, feeling like a hero for finally landing a girl he used to just crush on. Right then, Hona speaks up and tells him she has loved him all along. After falling deep into a scary apocalypse, she finally realized that someone like him actually cares about other people. To drive her point home, Hona makes him touch her so he can feel her heart pounding, showing him she's ready for anything with him. And that's the honey trap our guy falls for, because while he's busy daydreaming about birds and bees, Hyona rubs her thigh between his legs to make him even more lost and careless with his heart. He tells her that even though she means everything to him, acting this way right now just doesn't make sense. Hyona knows just how to play us, because she tricks our boy into closing his eyes so he can enjoy what happens next. His heart swells with joy as he closes his eyes, wondering what happens next, feeling just as excited as a child would in this magical moment. But then, right after he gets his first kiss with his crush, her mean boyfriend smashes his head against the ground. A brutal blow to the head leaves the poor guy quivering in a pool of blood, while Hyona screams in terror, not expecting anyone to kill someone so coldly. But her boyfriend snaps that they can't act innocent since they both knew Hanfong had to die from the start, and instead of caring about the victim, they just cheer at the loot they finally found. The kind man who tried to help is now dying in his own blood, unable to move as he watches Hyona celebrate with her lover. And in that final moment of being killed by a ruthless woman's plan, he makes a promise that if he gets another chance, he will never let anyone else use and throw him away again. But as he fades away, the fear turns into a warm light that pulls him in, and he thinks at first that he is finally going to heaven. But then his pure hope turns to dust as his spirit feels the world's agony and shatters into 100 pieces. By the time that terrifying ordeal ends, he jolts himself awake from his bed. His face glistens with sweat as he looks around, confused by everything he sees. Hanfong was barely hanging on a few seconds ago, but now he's fine. It's not only that he's okay, but the whole world is fine with no signs of disaster. Even after waiting half an hour, the sun stays warm, a feeling he never thought he'd feel again. Hanfong peeked at the calendar and saw that today was June 28th, meaning the apocalypse from the original story wouldn't hit until July 15th. This means he traveled back just weeks before the apocalypse. And while his face showed shock and confusion of being reborn, his new glowing red hand had already started to shine the moment he woke up. He waved it off, but the warm, painless glow stayed, making him think his mind was playing tricks until Hanfong sneezed and his hand turned bright green, only to grow even larger as Hanfong lost control of the power. With a heart pounding in his chest from panic, he stood frozen and clueless, staring at the fresh mess he'd just made. The glowing light that appeared from nowhere suddenly shrank in his hand, behaving strangely and differently from the red one. As he sat down, he confessed that his energy had suddenly vanished, likely because the green one had drained him more than ever. With a frustrated wave of his hand, Hanfong suddenly realizes he's living out his favorite awesome mana stories, where the main character gets reborn with superpowered abilities. So, Bro grabs a knife to test his own weapon and hopes for a miracle. But nothing works, leaving him looking like a complete clown as the blade does nothing. Not to mention his tummy is growling from all the energy he's lost. He checked the fridge but found it empty, making his hungry situation even worse and forcing him to find food before he risks passing out again. When he spots a jar of roasted soybeans, a sudden idea pops into his head. In the end of the world, these snacks aren't a real meal, but they'll fill your belly enough to keep you going. He grabs a bean and pops it into his mouth, only for it to instantly explode into a full-grown plant. His glowing green hand has vanished, and so has his exhaustion. Hanfang can't tell if it was the soybeans or something he did that made things go wrong. He snatches a bean sprout, pops it open, and realizes with shock that this is his brand new power. Hanfang is eager to master the new skill, but before diving in, he must first fix his current problems and make sure he has enough supplies to survive the coming apocalypse. He heads over to the supermarket. Next, he pushes through a noisy crowd of distracted people while Hanfang gathers himself. Realizing his glowing hands can sprout beans, but the green one drains his energy, making the final discovery even more exciting. He still can't get a handle on exactly what his power can do, and that's making him incredibly frustrated. While he's deep in thought, a familiar voice suddenly speaks to him. Hyona, the one who betrayed him before, has finally returned to face him. She is drop-dead gorgeous, but getting involved with her will literally drag you 6 feet under the ground, which leaves Hanfang pretty shocked to run into her again like this. For 3 whole years, he's had a secret crush on Lee Hyona, the girl he missed out on for so long. He tried every trick in the book to win her back, but deep down, he knew he was just a backup plan. Now, furious after being betrayed and murdered by her, he burns with rage, but knows he can't explode in anger while trapped in this new life. Hanfang steadies his nerves, deciding to hold off on his revenge for now, so he can gather his supplies first. Hyona waves her hand to get the guy's attention, worried that he's too spaced out to notice her. He tries hard to be polite to her and compliments Hyona's beauty, which leaves him speechless for a moment. She calls him a smooth talker and decides it's the perfect time to invite him out for some shopping. Even though she tried, he walked right past Hyona like she was invisible, leaving her completely rejected. That reality check hit her so hard, she couldn't even find the words to respond. Hanfang knows she's only being nice to invite him over, so she can use him like a personal ATM for her groceries, and since he's done being someone else's pet, he won't let that happen again. The Waldemar Shopping Plaza is famous for having the best supermarket in the whole area. Back when the Arctic apocalypse started, this place was emptied in a single night, and no one knows who did it. But Hanfang has found a survival guide to grab all the food, clothes, medicine, and supplies he needs before facing his next big problem. As the bro sits there feeling sorry for himself because he can't afford it, a sudden message arrives showing he just became eligible to borrow a massive 170,000 yuan for this year. It was exactly the lucky ticket he had been waiting for all along. With no one around to pay back debts in this apocalypse, Hanfang turned to every loan app he could find online and started tapping frantically to get money from everywhere. The scene shifts to Hyona, who is absolutely furious about how he treated her today. This stuck-up girl is too obsessed with her ex refusing her, and while it shows a lot about her character, she really didn't need to go and get the guy killed like she did in his past life. Hona sneers at Hanfang for being a hopeless loser without a car, making it clear she has no plans to ever be nice to him again. Just as if the devil himself had spoken, a car pulls up beside her and beeps loudly at her. Hyona is shocked to find out the driver is the same guy she was just talking about. Hanfang stops by to chat with her and tells her he just bought the car. After all, his dad has been raking in cash over there, so it was only natural he sent some money for him to have fun while he was busy taking him to the airport. This fact actually cools her down, making her think she was rejected because he had an important job to attend, so she apologizes for asking him out during such a busy time. Like a gaslighter Promax girl, she plays the victim by looking cute while crying and blaming him for being mean. Hanfang's reaction is truly strange. He first calls her silly, then pulls her close to say she's far too important for him to ever leave, while she, thinking she won the jackpot, tries to play on his feelings by claiming she feels the same and suggesting they watch a movie and have a nice dinner together. Just as she speaks, our boy shouts, "Peace thee out," and immediately starts packing his bags, complaining about how busy he is with everything he has to take back. Even Hona is baffled by why he suddenly bought so much stuff. Hanfang plays it cool, saying he did it because he wanted to, and then he tells her he got Hyona a present to raise her hopes. Feeling light and full of joy, she decides to head home, hoping to see it later. As she walks away, Hyona beams with pride, convinced she just landed the perfect shot. But she has no idea that our boy wears the same trickster grin, and they are both playing each other for fools. And he's never going to give away the location of his secret food stash, because that's his only hope of surviving this terrible apocalypse. And when the world finally falls apart, he plans to use it to take revenge on the guy who killed him and Hona. He admits he's now ready to savor the apocalypse, and I can already picture Huna about to feast with such delicious satisfaction. In just 2 weeks, the world will be buried under a thick blanket of snow as temperatures plummet to a freezing -20 degrees Celsius. For the next month, the heat fades until it's freezing cold at -70 degrees, snow buries the whole world, and going outside is too dangerous, so he has packed his apartment full of covered food so no one thinks he is storing up supplies. For the trickiest supplies, He'll sneak them away under the cover of darkness when nobody's watching. When the end times arrive, power will be shaky, so Hanfeng has already bought a year's worth of fuel to keep everything running smoothly. To fix his next problem, knowing the heating would fail, he hired a crew to reinforce his home against the coming apocalypse. Finally, he carved out a secret room for his stash, hidden from prying eyes, so he could grab whatever he needed whenever he wanted. By the time he finished getting ready, it was July 14th, and just one more day stood between him and the heat turning the world into an oven. After finishing all his preparations, he checks the last item on his list by studying his superpower. To survive this winter apocalypse without freezing, Hanfeng knows his supplies simply aren't enough to keep him alive. And this is where his plant-based powers shine as a beacon of hope. Right before his eyes sat the soybeans he had grown himself, and now it was time for the taste test. The real problem is that he still doesn't know what turns on his power, so Hanfeng just takes a spoonful anyway, hoping the food is safe to eat even though he's scared. After wiping up half the plate and finding the beans harmless, he can now safely create and eat food with this power. But the real puzzle is figuring out exactly how or what makes his hand glow. After testing his power on many things, he's only ever used it on soybeans. So, he checks his fridge, hoping to find some other veggies to try. Soon, the bright midday turns into the quiet of the evening. Hanfeng opens his tired eyes, wondering if he just fell asleep. He clutches a bunch of broccoli in his hand, while the kitchen walls are covered in a messy splash of vegetable juice. The only trouble he has is that his own power is so draining it makes it hard for him to think clearly. While munching on the same soybeans, he realized he'd finally figure out a new power, so let's rewind to see just what happened right before he blacked out. He sent a bunch of things down to try out his power and then used that power on a different group of plants. Here's the weird part. Some of those plants didn't react at all. But for the others, like the seeds, they grew into full plants just like his soybean experiments. There's also a third kind where some blew up right in his hand and nobody knows why that happened. Hanfeng also found burnt bits that looked like coal right after they exploded. It's great because those same things can be saved up to give you warmth later. With this, he finally found a way to stay warm against the coming harsh apocalypse. Excited, he focused on mastering his powers and testing them out, and even though he stumbled at first, the magic flaring up whenever Hanfeng tried to focus gave him exactly what he needed. He ran out of energy and dropped to the floor. Back in the present, he looks utterly baffled by his own powers, since some plants obey his will while others simply ignore him. It is tough to tell what will work and what will fail. Even so, he has learned that the trigger lives deep within his mind, so he now meditates on a peaceful moment where he feels completely united with nature. It's a moment that links his mind and body, feeling exactly the same. What he dreams up always turns out to be a hit. The moment Hanfeng opened his eyes, he breathed a sigh of relief to see his hand glowing green, proving his power wakes up with his mind. To push his skill further, he tests his power on a pile of meat just to be sure. The poor guy sighs with disappointment, because if this only works on plants, he's stuck eating nothing but leaves for the rest of his life. He strains his eyes and begs his magic to work, but nothing happens. This makes him doubt his own thoughts, forcing him to remember his meditation trick where he usually sees either red or green, but so far, he's only ever tried the green one. This time, he shut his eyes tight, trying to reach out to his second power. To his shock, his hand began glowing red and warped the meat into a gross, spiky blob that looked almost unrecognizable. Disgusted by what he saw, he threw the meat down and crept closer to check it again. Even though Hanfeng tried pinching and grabbing it to see if the red glow was just cooking it or if it really reacted to his light. Peering at his hand again, he realizes the horror isn't that the meat is cooked, but that it is slowly falling apart and melting away. Realizing that green light speeds up evolution while red light breaks it apart, he holds the meat between his hands to mix these two opposing forces. Suddenly, a flash of yellow appears, and the meat grows into a massive slab, leaving him puzzled as to where his soybeans went since they must have somehow melted into the meat. Hanfeng is stunned by the power he just unleashed, and after checking it closer, he realizes the meat is the freshest he has ever seen. His heart races with excitement, and he can't wait to give it one final try. But his luck turns against him as Bro fails so badly that everything goes black, leaving him slamming his hands on the floor in frustration before finally calming down to patiently experiment with his powers. He's thrilled that he managed to find out so many new things in just one day. If only he can truly master this power. Bro thinks he'll grow up to be like Superman and stand on top of the whole world. But then the fool realizes that food isn't enough to save him. He needs a weapon to defend himself from other people right now. Just as he's about to head out and grab a weapon, he suddenly realizes the end of the world has started. Just like last time, the world is being buried in a crazy amount of snow, even though it's July. He heads out anyway, convinced he must find a gun before the cold hits minus 45 degrees, even though buying one is illegal there. While lost in his own thoughts, he spots a broccoli-haired punk ranting about being Lao Wang's younger brother from the Shay Gang leader group, using the classic, "my brother makes more money" trick to win petty fights. Han Fong actually recognizes this clown from somewhere, thanks to his terrible style. The funniest part is how everyone has decided to call him Homeless Joe. They say Les and Homeless Joe, who lives in the same neighborhood, know a contractor guy who can get you anything because he knows everyone around. Everyone stops to ask what's going on, and he acts like he's the busiest guy in the neighborhood, always claiming he's too busy working on his projects with his big brother. That bro has no job, yet he sits there whining on his phone, acting like he's got millions to spend on a project. Han Fong glances at the guy and wonders if this idiot can help him grab the weapon he needs. He smiles at Homeless Joe and acts like they've been friends for years, even though he doesn't actually know him. Han Fong plays the part of Shirao Han, using the man's ego to trick him into acting like old friends. So the desperate homeless man quickly apologizes for forgetting and rushes off to finish his work. Han Fong scans the area, rushes toward the punk, and spills the whole story. Once he finishes talking, Homeless Joe gets shocked and wonders why this guy would need a gun. Just as Han Fong is speechless, the blonde punk cuts him off to warn that guns are illegal and that his own shady connections won't make Homeless Joe want to get involved in anything dangerous. Han Fong explains that he needs it to protect himself, since some people are out to get him. He spun a made-up tale about crashing into a fellow cyclist on his way to work, only for the other rider to carelessly spit right in his face. Of course, it made him furious, so he marched up to the clown and started beating him up right in front of everyone. After making him look like a fool, the man walked away, only for the humiliated man to seethe with anger and vow to come back with his friends. And so, the very next day, Bro got absolutely torn apart by the whole gang, who laughed at him and pummeled Han Fong from head to toe. After that beast attacked, he's been looking for a self-defense weapon to keep himself safe. Luckily, Homeless Joe cares about Joe's story and insists that spitting on someone is way too far, saying it must be punished. But Han Fong starts to wonder if this guy is still missing the point of his own complaining. Still, Homeless Joe wraps his arm around him like a guardian angel, promising to fix everything by calling his big brother and making things right, leaving Han Fong thrilled that fortune is finally smiling on him. Homeless Joe says to take the boss, since his fancy car is getting a tune-up right now. Han Fong nods in agreement, proving to Homeless Joe that he has a vehicle ready for them to use. As they drive along, Homeless Joe is stunned to learn that the car costs $700,000 and thinks it's a fantastic deal. He's taking photos like he's the star of his own Instagram show. The funniest thing is that he writes the caption as if the big truck belongs to him. While the big brother chats, his gang hangs out by the fire, laughing at the crazy weather. Han Fong's car pulls up and Homeless Joe jumps out, acting all smug while his friends can't believe he bought his own SUV, even claiming he paid the huge price himself. Han Fong is left thinking it's very bold of Homeless Joe to say that to the car's owner. In the next scene, the punk takes Han Fong to his boss, a tattooed gang leader who is so angry to see his brother that he immediately kicks the blonde guy out. To that, Homeless Joe turns the pressure on to Han Fong, insisting that his friend right here wants to buy a gun. The gang leader is shocked at first and glares down at our boy. Han Fong is shaking with fear, while the boss just sighs, annoyed that they traveled all this way just for a boring gun when there were way cooler things to find. The boss orders his lackey to grab a handgun, tosses it over to Han Fong, and demands $6,000 for it. But our boy isn't feeling like playing with those tiny, tricky guns right now. No, he's here ready to go full John Wick, asking for a long gun with a scope. The boss gets mad at the kid's boldness and scolds him for asking for a sniper rifle, reminding him that he's not here to bargain or act like he owns the place, proving once again that the boss is just a stuck-up jerk who loses his temper over nothing. That's where we find Homeless Joe spinning another tale, this time about Han Feng's wife who cheated on him 3 times. By the time the story ended, the boss flew into a furious rage, screaming at us for daring to defend the boy. From what I'm seeing, these ridiculous tales look like they were made for the big screen. Finally, the boss agrees to get the sniper rifle, though it will take a few days, and Han Fong is grateful that his request is being taken care of. Changzi, the lowly underling, is ordered to hand him a semi-automatic weapon too. The boss finally softened his heart and gave the guy a free gun as a special gift. Han Fong is totally stunned when he watches him hand over the gun for free. Grateful for the help, our boy quietly shares a secret with the gang. He's bragging that he knows the government and warning that the weather is only going to get worse, so we'd better grab supplies fast before they're gone. This time, Han Feng's serious stare makes his advice feel even more important. The boss decided to listen to his advice, and that was how the meeting ended. Walking back, Homeless Joe chats about how he handled that meeting like a pro mediator, and he's even happier that his brother was in a good mood. Hanfang is so grateful he wants to buy Joe some cigarettes, and after pretending to be good for a bit, the homeless man finally gives in, hilariously asking for 8 whole cartons as if it were an easy job to do. While he complains loudly, Hanfang quietly checks off his survival list, feeling ready for the apocalypse and eager to master his powers. With food being the last small hurdle he plans to clear before everything goes smoothly. Just as he's feeling all confident with his plans, Bro suddenly trips right in front of Homeless Joe and takes a hard fall, leaving Hanfang's leg in terrible shape and shaking from the pain while Joe just stands there confused, wondering what happened so suddenly. Our boy is pretty sure he broke his leg, so he hands Joe the keys to drive them to the hospital. She stared at him in silence, then shamefully admitted she didn't even have a driver's license. So he has to go back to the old school way, even though the punk tries to push him to the side. The scene is so depressing that Hanfang calls a taxi just to escape the torture. Next, the story shifts to the hospital. As head nurse Jian works the night shift in the reception area, she watches the snow pile up, falling even harder with every passing hour. Just as she settles in, the phone rings with urgent news that the hall needs more hands right away. By the way, our boy really did end up breaking his leg and is now at the hospital, devastated by the news, but he has to spend an hour there for observation before he can take his meds and go home. He had a perfect plan for everything, only to have a random twist knock it all to pieces. Brother Lee waves goodbye, explaining he's swamped with a ton of deals to finish. Well, that leaves Hanfang right back at the start. He's alone with a bad leg to manage while the hospital gets crowded by new patients fleeing the crazy weather that promises even worse trouble soon. Hanfang stands at the front of a super long line, impatiently waiting for his medicine. He spots the pretty head nurse in the distance checking a patient's pulse and is instantly blown away by her youth, since she's relied upon so much by the doctors and staff that Hanfang can't believe someone so young is running the show. She's incredibly kind to every patient, and she looks adorable from head to toe, so he's singing again, this time for a different lady. As he gawks at her beauty, an elderly man asks for help, prompting her to rush over, only for him to complain of sudden back pain, while she gently reminds him that they're understaffed and it will take time. A sleazy old man tries to cheat the head nurse by secretly filming her while she works, and she promises to send him an x-ray later when things calm down. But the old geyser isn't done yet. He switches to full PDF mode and wraps his arms around her. The head nurse, still clueless, promises he'll be right there with a doctor to check on the patient. But here's the problem. The ancient geyser doubles down and steals a huge feast from the hospital's best bakery. Just as he tries to grab another one, our boy hurls his crutch right into the old man's face, sending him crashing down, which makes the head nurse jump at the sudden mess, while Hanfang sheepishly admits he never knew how to use a crutch and accidentally threw it at someone with full speed. Hanfang pretends to be fixing the old man's phone just as the grumpy old guy yells at him to stop. Our boy sees the picture in his gallery, and he gets mad. He can't believe this jerk not only snapped a picture of the nurse, but also dared to touch her. So he immediately confronts him and threatens to call security to throw the old guy in a cell, since it would be one less annoying person in the hospital, especially someone there just to take advantage of others. Hanfang isn't giving the phone back and promises to post a report on social media if he ever catches this creep messing with things again. The old man, unable to do anything, sprints away in frustration, turning into a blur of speed right out of the hospital despite his recent back troubles. Even the head nurse stood speechless at how fast he ran, while Hanfang felt that some people are truly as naive as the world they live in. He shows her the photo and explains that the guy meant her harm right from the start. So Hanfang agrees and even hands her the phone to call the police. Jean beams with joy as she grabs the device, yet a chilling thought stops her. How could Hanfang have gotten up if his ankle was truly broken? This realization hits him hard, making the agony of his broken leg crash over him as he screams out in pain. After a bit of time, she hurriedly wrapped his wounds in proper bandages. Hanfang is finally feeling much better, and the head nurse is so thankful to him that she has promised to protect herself from anyone who might try to hurt her again. But just as she speaks, our boy's foot is being pushed right into her 2 different sides. Hanfang thinks this girl won't get the hang of things anytime soon. Jinan is called back for her duty, so she stumbles away while telling our boy to come back in a week for a proper checkup. Hanfang accepts the sad truth that in just 7 days, he will never see her face again. He walks away, carrying that heavy, gloomy thought in his head. By the next day, the sky turned against us. News is buzzing everywhere about sudden, heavy drops in temperature. Dubai and Egypt are getting heavy snowfalls, something experts from 46 countries never thought they'd see. so they have rushed a meeting to figure out what's really happening. The experts say this deep freeze is just a short storm that will clear up in a few days. Still, people are told to stay inside and act normally, while Hanfang sits safe and warm in his special room, laughing at the news that promises the disaster will pass when he knows it never will, because this time he is finally ready with his supplies and his heater running. For now, there's nothing left to worry him since the building group chat is going wild with complaints about the freezing cold and how hard it is to stay warm. What makes this group chat so wild is that one anonymous member drops a bombshell, claiming the Ice Age apocalypse is about to start and that the snowstorm is actually coming from inside the Earth. The messages shock Hanfeng because nobody is supposed to know this secret just yet. Hang's mind instantly flags this mysterious stranger as someone to watch out for. After all, as the story's hero, he's the only one who knows the apocalypse is coming. What used to be a happy neighborhood has turned into a rowdy mob on a leash, so the residents are tagging property management to fix the snowstorm mess. And since staring at boring text messages got old fast, their group chat transformed into a fun theme park where everyone shows up as little cartoon avatars. The angry residents are fed up because the snow is blocking their exit, trapping them from grocery shopping, and making them feel their expensive fees aren't worth the terrible service. So they're ready to confront the property agent if things don't get fixed soon. While the property management team frantically apologizes and offers only half-hearted reassurance to frustrated residents who are now demanding refunds, our guy Hang Fun watches from the chaos, annoyed by the endless arguing over nonsense, knowing that no amount of hope can actually fix the snowstorm. One resident, named Janu, admits he isn't tough enough to fight the blizzard alone, so he suggests the group help each other out instead of fighting. Since natural disasters are beyond what property managers can do, venting anger about them is a waste of time. Not everyone in the lobby likes John's relaxed vibe, as some of these wild and short-sighted folks turn on him for daring to criticize the property managers. Jean argues he's just being fair, but the hungry crowd refuses to listen until the snow is gone, so they can buy food. Hin tries to reason with the stubborn crowd, warning them that clearing the snow from their yards doesn't mean the roads will be safe, so he suggests just walking to the store since that path is much easier to fix than the whole road. Hang Fun pulls a sour face once he spots the guy who's been acting like some fake spiritual leader. The way our boy stares at him, it's plain they don't have a friendly history. Suddenly, a guy who hates bad stuff and looks annoyed jumps right into the chat. He speaks plainly with no fancy words, telling everyone that if they want to eat, they must go outside and start clearing the roads. Otherwise, all that gossip won't even melt the snow. Then he logs off, and another guy steps up, eager to go down and help clean up the mess outside. Hang Fong knows the sharp-tongued tough guy all too well. One by one, the townspeople join the crew to clear the roads. Even the tiniest and sweetest ones are ready to get their paws muddy for this noble cause. There's also Hyona, an unforgettable volunteer who has stepped up to help. Hang Fong still doesn't get how a woman like her could ever agree to join, but she finally realizes her volunteering is just a trick to lure in all the gooners, so that they can watch a beauty like her drain herself around men. Just as we knew she would, she seized the moment and passed her duties to others, proving once again that you can't expect anything but opportunism from someone like her. As Hang Fong logs out, his frustrated face shows that this woman never fails to ruin his day. Right now, she's actually typing a message to him. Why, you ask? Well, because she knows this desperate guy would do anything she asks, so she wants him to bring her food supplies. She even adds a sneak peek of her bare legs and thick thighs, with hardly any clothes on, all designed to melt our boy's heart. Hang gives her a perfect score of 10 out of 10 for trying to seduce him with almost nothing on, even though it's freezing cold. With his leg broken and unable to chase the treasure, he can't move a muscle, so he settles for tossing a teasing remark that's sure to make her skin crawl. Just as he said, his words worked perfectly and made her so mad she wanted to stomp on him. Here's a little look back. This was the third day of the blizzard, with the cold dropping below 20 degrees, and since the real destruction was just starting, the central heat was still running. The internet stayed on, keeping everyone distracted, so Hang Fong, bored like any teen, just scrolled through TikTok watching busta women in short shorts. Even though it's only day 2 of this apocalypse, he's already bored and wondering how being all alone changes a man. His broken leg was giving him a hard time, keeping him stuck in one spot and forcing him to spend the next few months watching video after video, since he had nowhere else to go. That's when he stumbles upon something inspiring in a news report about a guy who can heal himself after falling from the 15th floor and breaking every bone inside his body. But soon, the man began to heal himself right before our eyes. Thinking about his supernatural powers made Hang Fong remember his own secret tricks, so he lit up the green glow on his hand and tried to fix his broken bone. But the green energy sputtered and died without doing anything, and when he tried again, it still didn't work. Only failure waited for him. So after admitting defeat, he slumped onto the couch, wishing he hadn't let his hopes rise for just a moment before hours of endless scrolling finally led him into sleep. In his dream, he rode a giant goat wearing strange clothes while a huge flock of flying goats with flapping heads chased behind him. But the ride suddenly stopped hard when the goats slammed on their brakes and threw him off. He heard his leg snap from the fall, but a goat started licking it, making him push it away in disgust and angering the animal until it whipped out its absurdly long tongue, wrapped it around his leg, and yanked him straight into the sky. The moment his tongue wraps around the wound, that cut on his leg begins to heal right away. Just then, Hangfong jolted awake in a cold, shaking sweat, still terrified by the crazy dream that had left him drenched from head to toe. Suddenly, he sees his leg glowing with green light as it fixes itself. Not long after, he slowly took off his bandages and carefully put his foot back on the ground. Surprisingly, he felt no pain at all, as if the green light had healed him only after he drifted off to sleep. To prove his crazy idea, he grabs a sharp knife and tries to cut himself, desperate to restart the healing process. His hand shakes as he hesitantly cuts a small nick in his finger while testing his new power. Let's step back outside to see the angry crowd finally using their energy well, as their combined efforts have cleared the path right in front of the main gate. All the credit belongs to Jang for his inspiring pep talk that got everyone moving. Jang then hands out a special bonus to the old man who had worked the hardest of all. The elderly man then praised the twins for working just as hard. Then comes everyone's favorite broken nurse, Jingyin, wobbling through the icy snow until the twins spot her and rush forward to pull her up. Afterward, the twins decide to get back to work to clear the way and tell her to call if she needs more help. Seeing the snow pile up fast, Jang shouts for everyone to dash quickly to the grocery store and hurry back before the storm gets worse. When talking about supplies, the old man suddenly remembers something, but he wouldn't bring it up until Jang insisted. The old man shares a rumor about a guy spotted recently moving into an apartment with a small truck, but Jang just thinks it's normal for someone new to have to carry their own stuff. But then the old man shared a surprising detail. He noticed the man was hauling both gas tanks and a fireplace, which looked like serious winter survival prep instead of just moving boxes. Before they can think about it much longer, the twins come back with an update on how things are going. Suddenly, a guy pops up out of nowhere, clearly listening in on the old man's story and dying to hear more about how he's getting ready for winter. But this curious guy quickly gets hit with a snowball by Lu Yin, who yells at him to quit slacking and get back to work. Zhang steps in to end the squabble and orders everyone to clear the way since the path is open. Nurse Jin is just as excited about shopping as she is about her next mission. Meanwhile, the old man turns to Jang for his take, wondering if the new arrival already knows the blizzard is coming. Jang pauses for a moment before carefully sidestepping the question. He insists the blizzard will pass quickly, so there's no need to worry. If the storm keeps raging, it's a stroke of luck that their neighbor has plenty of supplies to keep everyone safe, turning a disaster into a chance for survival. As the snowstorm grows fiercer and forces everyone to rush toward the store, Lazy Hang Fong finally wakes up from his cozy nap after hearing a familiar voice knock on his door. When he opens the door, he finds the homeless Joe holding exactly the good stuff they asked for. This was the promised gift from Boss Lu, and Brother Lee brought it because he had stockpiled supplies in advance. So unlike others running frantically through the city, he could afford to stay put, yet Han Fong still thanked him for braving the weather. Brother Lee shared some surprising rumors about last night, where an unknown person had completely emptied a supermarket in the Eastern District, leaving Boss Lu's gang to find nothing but empty shelves when they arrived, a feat that seemed impossible to Han Fong. But there was no doubt in Brother Lee's voice. This had really happened, and Han Fong was starting to see that something stranger than before was going on, because it seemed he wasn't the only one who had gotten superpowers. Lee suddenly spoke up, urging Han Fong to dress warmer and be careful. After saying his goodbyes and walking away, our hero was finally alone to think things over. He kept trying to make sense of the strange events from last night. All he could think was that a hero from a comic book with a magical pocket to hold endless supplies must have done it. The only question left was whether people with such powers could really exist in this world. And the answer was simple. Since he had superpowers, someone else could too. This scary discovery meant Han Fong had to stop everything and get to know his powers perfectly so he could always plan how to beat other superhumans. So he opened his diary to review what he knew, that his abilities could react with both plants and animals. With its help, he could grow them fast, make them bigger, and fry them, though the taste was terrible, and he later learned that success wasn't guaranteed for every product. Take soybeans, where only a tenth actually sprout, while meat yields far fewer, leaving Han Fong puzzled by these strange odds. Suddenly, the soybean under the force burst in his hand, sending up a nasty green cloud. Instead of a normal plant, our hero held just a stinky rock. This was starting to grate on him, and since so many attempts were failing, Hanfang knew he had to learn to control his power better. So he made up his mind to start training hard. In the end, he knew that nothing beats practice for learning a skill, so he worked without rest until late that night. And when he finally looked at the fresh soybean plant with pods in his hands, he knew he had made it. He didn't achieve this easily. He was sweating so hard that he was heating up his whole apartment. But that was the cost he paid to learn a few tricks that made him win more often. He discovered that the green light's energy changes, so each product needs its own special time under the light based on its nutritional value. If you don't guess just how long to cook it, you'll end up with a burnt, smelly rock, so you need to know the perfect cooking time for each product. This reminds me of Hanfang, a popular music and dance game from a decade ago, where you had to press the right buttons in rhythm at the right time. It was also possible to compare energy to directions like up, down, right, and left, making sure the energy added to the object was right every second until we hit a key moment and had to stop the whole process. Do it right, and you'll see success, turning every soybean seed into a thriving plant. After mastering plants, Hanfang started trying meat, though it was very different from vegetables. If you mess up the process, the meat will turn into a gross black mush. But the rules for spinning meat were still meant to be the same. Everything was going to plan until we hit a snag, figuring out just how much energy the meat needed to start. The chicken leg blew up just like the others before it, spewing out a nasty black mess. It seemed he would take even longer to master working with meat than with plant food, because every time Hanfang tried, he failed, and the chicken legs kept exploding one after another. It looked like the failures would never stop, so our hero finally snapped, screaming in frustration and swearing at this cursed skill that only got harder. But the hero refused to quit, and while the snow outside grew heavier and the cold bit harder, Hanfang kept pushing forward, leaving marks of his effort all over the kitchen. Then came the moment of truth, with just one last chicken leg left. Energy surged in every direction, flashing with vibrant reds and greens. To him, the game felt like a frustratingly tricky puzzle where every tiny mistake forced him to start over. But when the pressure hit its peak, Hanfang finally won by growing a chicken leg, so huge it was impossible to ignore. Our hero let out a snort of disdain, declared it worth it, and then collapsed onto the floor, too tired to move but happy enough to stay there. He had finally figured out how to make fake meat. The sky outside is turning darker every day, as news reports say that July 17th marks the third straight day of snow disasters happening across the whole country in a rare event that only occurs once every few thousand years. So officials are working hard to keep people safe and help them through this trouble. The news Hanfang heard kept him wide awake until the next morning. Hanfang had heard these empty promises about snow stopping everything and the need to wait for help before he finally had to stay inside, something that felt oddly familiar since he'd lived through all of it in a past life. Just as he glanced at his phone, a message popped up, then a whole bunch of others followed right after. Hanfang instantly noticed it was the neighbors from his own building making so much noise that he couldn't help but jump into the crowd, where everyone was arguing wildly about whether the rescuers would actually come to save them or if they had to trust only themselves. One avatar stood out from the crowd and asked the gullible person if they truly believed the news they were hearing. Old Uncle Lou refused to believe the TV news, insisting that if the government truly controlled everything, the rescue crews would have arrived by now, not rumors of tanks and armored vehicles being secretly gathered in the capital city. They're likely getting ready for the war that's about to start. When the group chat learned that a real war might be coming from somewhere we don't know, a scary quiet spread through it among the worried survivors. Suddenly, worries flared up as people rushed to Uncle Lou with questions, fearing that if he was right, they had no chance left, while Hanfang watched the shadow of war grow, his eyes wide with the strange memories of a past life where he had already seen this coming. Zhang quickly spoke up to stop the noise and insisted that if Uncle Lou was right, they had to start preparing to survive and save everyone. Seeing that some neighbors had already run out of supplies, and with government help still unclear, he suggested we get together to help those in need. He urged anyone with extra supplies to share some, and to prove his point, Mr. Zhang promised to give half of his stash to whoever needed it most. The other owners whispered urgently to each other as they talked about the new idea. One man fully supported Mr. Zhang's plan since everyone was just trying to survive the crisis, promising to give whatever he could and even pulling Li Hyona into it. She knew this crazy Wu Kuan Yu, and that man was trying to humiliate her in front of everyone just because she had rejected him before. Li Hyona had to play defense, acting like a shy girl and apologizing for running out of supplies, but most of her fans instantly rushed to defend the witch. The little row was so bad it nearly ruined their plan to get everyone together to do something kind. But soon, donations began to pour in, So many people were inspired by Mr. Jang's heartfelt speech that they sent food, clothes, and medicine to help. Mr. Jang thanked everyone who offered to help and wisely chose some owners to manage the growing group. He would naturally take the lead on the Interim Emergency Committee, a group formed to plan and hand out the donated supplies. Han Fong gave a smug grin after reading the notice, recognizing the scheme from his past life, where such a committee was just a trick to steal others' resources. It was July 19th, the 5th day since the world ended, and the cold outside had already plummeted to minus 40 degrees. This was the day the building's heat finally gave up and stopped working because of the freezing cold. Everyone was frantically thinking up ways to stay warm without any heaters. A few people managed to start a small fire inside their homes, just like in the past, but it was already terrible and things were only going to get much worse. Everyone followed the rules except our MC, Han Feng, who had a mountain of failed charcoal experiments just perfect for his fireplace. A fizzy iced cola and a scrumptious slice of strawberry cake sat waiting on the table. Han Feng was zoning out, lost in his video game and ignoring everything around him, until a phone call suddenly burst in and ruined his peace. After pausing his games, he took a sip of Coke and answered the call from the Block 8 leader, who said the roads would be clear in 20 minutes and that they needed extra hands in the basement car park. Han Feng held back his urge to curse at the random guy, frustrated that they still didn't get it while the snow kept piling up. Reluctantly, Han Feng leaves the safety of his home to head down to the main lobby, knowing that falling out with his neighbors would be a big problem now and that he must keep his secret safe. The moment they saw the gate, it was clear the snow had already locked them inside the building. Other volunteers were furious that the paths they had cleared were buried under the deepest snow they'd ever seen. The volunteers decided to just get the door open, so they spotted Han Feng and called him over to help pull it wide. They dug their heels in, leaned every ounce of their weight against the door, and heaved with one sharp count of 3. To everyone's shock, opening the door flooded the lobby with snow and left everyone exposed to the fierce storm outside. The storm was so fierce that no one could survive the freezing air, and getting too close meant that simply opening your eyes could leave you blind. Han Feng wished he'd stayed on his cozy couch instead of risking frostbite and death by working outside in such freezing weather. Luckily, the other volunteers quickly agreed that no one in their right mind would ever step outside in such freezing weather. Speaking of idiots, he had finally shown up, and that familiar voice echoed in Han Feng's ears. It was none other than Homeless Joe, also known as Brother Lee, who was roasting everyone for acting like cowards instead of stepping up when it mattered most. The volunteers shook in their boots, pleading with Brother Lee to stop his crazy plan and stay inside the terrible snowstorm, even though he was tough enough to handle it. First, he took one last deep drag and popped the finished cigarette. Pumped to charge and like a madman, Brother Lee plowed through the snow with his hands, trapping everyone inside. The fool began shouting like a character from an anime, while punching at the snow, sending the pile flying everywhere, and he kept right on going. He even managed to dig a hole big enough for a homeless person right in the middle of the huge pile of snow, and then everything went quiet. After a short while, the only sounds the volunteers heard were confusing cries for help coming from beneath the snow. Everyone had to pull freezing, snow-covered Joe out of the drifts. His face turned purple from the biting cold and the heavy snow crushing him. The volunteers sighed and shut the gate, knowing it was time to stay inside. Han Feng rushed up to his Brother Lee to check if the foolish gangster was okay. He told everyone to head to the car park to find the person in charge, so they could decide their next move once the snow stopped. With a blizzard so fierce it swept across the whole world, there was no amount of human effort that could fix the trouble. Down in the underground car park, the air felt a bit calmer and mister. Surrounded by the building's owners, Jang, the one who really runs things, agreed to pause the clearing effort after hearing news from the lobby and decided that the basement parking lot would be the new spot for collecting and dropping off donations. Han Feng kept his head down, quietly meeting the guy named Jang for the first time in the group chat. This meant the guy who started that scam committee was Mr. Jang, who used his polite smile to trick everyone into thinking they were united. Mr. Zhang talked about how many owners had sent such a huge amount of gifts. He felt thankful for the generous gifts that would help people who were struggling. The car park felt hopeful because everyone felt good about helping others, which made them feel united as they worked toward surviving. Han Feng sensed a secret they hadn't noticed yet, and while they waded through what felt like endless disaster, they were slowly running out of supplies they'd foolishly given up. Brother Lee, still shaking from his earlier stunt, decided to go up first to say goodbye to Han Feng. Han Feng scanned the parking lot and spotted someone who really stood out. It was that airhead nurse from his broken leg days, now looking clumsy in a cute winter onesie as she tried to push a wobbly stack of boxes through the crowded committee. Feeling out of place, she ended up bumping into some of the guys hanging out there. She would have fallen flat on her face if Han Feng hadn't swooped in to save her and then asked if the blushing nurse was okay while holding her in the box. When she finally opened her eyes, she thanked him for saving her life and slowly realized that the person standing by her was Han Feng in the hospital. Then she realized he had a bad leg injury and couldn't save falling girls. Han Feng panicked as he realized he had acted too soon, leaving him trapped with no way out. He stumbled over his words before admitting that he had always been a fast healer since he was young. His shaky hands and jittery movements made his whole act feel fake. Luckily, the nurse was too thick to notice any lies in his words and actions, so she just thought he was healing at a fantastic rate. Han Feng offered to help lift her heavy boxes, but after some convincing, she finally agreed to let him carry them. The moment his hands closed around the supplies, he dropped them in shock at their surprising weight. They felt strangely heavy, so he asked what was inside, and she explained they were mostly medical supplies she was giving to those who needed them. She also admitted they might be a bit too heavy, but she was sure she could manage carrying them to the donation spot. So charmed by her beauty and kindness, you'd happily let Han Feng carry extra weight, and he'd never say a word. Because she boasted that she was tougher than most men, the nurse kept telling him not to push too hard, and when he asked if she'd always been strong since she was little, she grew quiet and admitted there was a reason behind it all. Hearing those mysterious words made Han Feng curious, but she felt awkward sharing the story and apologized, admitting that something strange had recently happened that she couldn't quite explain. They had been talking and walking for a while, yet she still didn't know his name. Han Feng nodded and gave his name right back. The angelic nurse, Jin Shu, introduced herself with a huge smile that showed how much she loved this surprise meeting. Every time he saw that smile, he couldn't say a word. He was one step away from getting in, until Nurse Jin asked what he does, and his honest answer that he's out of work nearly cost him a chance. But thanks to some manual logic, an impatient man walked right by, bumped Nurse Jin, and made her tumble onto Han Feng, who was the only one she could hold onto to steady herself. This also caused her soft breasts to suddenly press against Han Feng's arm. With no Riz to worry about, Han Feng just stood there and enjoyed the moment. Nurse Jin quickly pulled back and apologized, but Han Feng waved it off, saying it was no problem at all. It would have been a perfect first meeting if not for Li Hyona, shuffling up to Han Feng like a hungry, freezing zombie with her eyes wide and empty. Acting like a parasite, the witch lunged at Han Feng, rubbing her chest against his arm, and slowly grabbed him to ask about the pink-haired lady and whether she was a friend. Nurse Jin quickly pulled the supplies away from Han Feng, feeling a bit awkward since she just wanted to log her donations and let the two friends chat without interruption. Han Feng asked Hona why she was down here while he sadly watched Nurse Jin hurry to the donation point, and the witch explained that she came to get supplies because she was worried about Han Feng's lack of activity. He scratched his head and said he was about to text, but she called him a liar after seeing him happily chatting with another woman just now. Then someone asked if he had any extra food at home, and she said she was running low and wondered if she could share some of Han Feng's supplies. He wasn't angry at all. Instead, he just smirked. Keeping up his fake shy act, Han Feng said he had little food left but would share a bit with anyone who bothered to reply to his messages. He stepped forward, grabbed the witch by the waist, and asked if she'd come with him to his home for a few days. The witch stumbled for a second, caught off guard by the sudden confidence of her supposed simp. She pushed him away with a smile and insisted that if Han Feng wanted to chat, they could just do it online. Han Feng took the refusal as a flat-out rejection and turned around to go back to his home. In a desperate moment, the witch grabbed him before he could run, telling him to wait, reminding him of his recent change, while also saying she had always taken her feelings very seriously. With puppy eyes that were too cute to resist, Hyona promised she wasn't just dating Han Feng for his cash and asked for a bit more time to make things serious. Han Feng blushed as he watched her performance. Luckily, he checked himself right away. If he hadn't already died by her hands, he might have believed her, but now he just wanted to rip that ugly mask off her face. But the truth about the man hiding behind the witch still wasn't found. Thinking it over, he wondered why he'd go looking for the guy when he could just act like he did before and let Hyona bring him over naturally, knowing he'd be ready this time. Knowing she had a powerful rifle while they only had a steel bat, he decided to stay out of trouble and just joke that he was only teasing. The witch felt a bit embarrassed for another time, putting on an acting show just to make a joke. Still, Han Feng promised to wait for a message so he could bring food supplies the next day. With that, they officially said their goodbyes, and she even told him to text her if he ever wanted to talk. As the witch stepped out of the parking lot, a wicked grin slowly curled up at the corners of her ugly mouth. She had no idea that Han Feng was the one pulling the strings this time, and he loved teasing her on the low-key. 2 days went by with no word from Han Feng to the witch. This quickly turned into Lai Hyona, exploding his phone with furious texts demanding the promised supplies. Hanfang sat and let the salty messages pile up while he enjoyed a sizzling steak and a fizzy drink. How awesome would it be to feast on delicious meat while tormenting the witch who killed you in your past life? Especially since finding the perfect recipe to make it so tasty felt like a game changer. He wasn't just hanging out these past few days either. He ran many tests to find two big truths. His meat couldn't stretch forever, but like soybeans, it could be made over and over again until he had pounds and pounds of it. For every batch of beans that sprouted, he kept half to plant new ones and ate the other half. With the same trick, he could turn half a steak and a handful of soybeans into a full meal just by shining red and green light on them. By repeating the same trick again and again, he found a way to get endless steak, and after many tests, he finally knew he'd never go hungry again. Even on the 18th day of a snowstorm that had turned August into winter, TV crews kept sending reporters to the Maldive Islands near the equator, where the air had finally dropped to a freezing minus 42 degrees. The whole island was swallowed by ice and snow, and even the ocean was freezing so fast you could see it happening with your own eyes. It was truly unreal. Experts say the ice layer grew to be 55 centimeters thick, and this strange cold spell wasn't just here, but happened in other warm countries near the equator too. While Hanfeng watched the news and laughed at how well they hid the truth that the world outside was much worse, his quiet sip of wine was suddenly broken by a scary noise from outside that sent a shock through him. Hanfeng rushed to the window and pulled back the curtains, only to see a building burning in the distance, marking the 7th explosion in just a few days and leaving even him wondering what was causing it, knowing full well that this was a very bad sign. The city was suddenly buzzing with more military helicopters buzzing overhead than before. Just like him, every other survivor was completely in the dark. The chaos outside had everyone scrambling around the basement parking lot, bartering for food and supplies like campers in a desperate time. Because greed never knows when to stop, people took advantage of their neighbors, which led to many fights and arguments. Right in the middle of it all stood Mr. Jang, still playing his part as the dependable leader who gave resources to the poor for free. Today was a special day when Hanfeng joined the other survivors and headed down to the basement car park. But he had only been out of his shelter for a few minutes before the freezing cold began to bite into him. Every time he stepped out of his cozy house, he wished he'd never left. The only reason he came down was to gather some useful information, because without it, he'd never show his face to those people again. Just as he was about to start over, he remembered a rebellion that had swept through the neighborhood and was likely connected to the people in this basement, who were still keeping their promise to share resources instead of scamming folks. Hanfeng started acting like a detective to figure out what was really happening at this messy party. The long lines in the collection area showed that many families were struggling with shortages. At the front of the line, a man shouted that he didn't get enough help even though he had donated many large boxes, while Mr. Jang insisted that everyone was given an equal share. Holding a can and a sausage, the man demanded his donations back, but the committee couldn't just hand them over. With the disaster still raging, Mr. Jang begged the man to see the bigger picture and promised to pay him back many times over once things calmed down, but a promise of money for an uncertain tomorrow meant nothing in the moment. Soon, the rest of the line turned on the whining man, shouting at him to stop being such a shameless jerk and just move along. It didn't take long for an angry crowd to form around the idea of hating this shameless man who just wanted a few more supplies for his family, since they were completely controlled by the interim committee. Hanfeng knew the people in charge would never give up their resources when things were this tight. Standing above everyone else just because you arrived first with supplies was just as dishonorable. Then, the legendary man himself, known for his shameless ways, finally showed up in the basement. It was none other than Homeless Joe, who looked a lot worse than a few days ago, frail and sickly and thin. It had been a long time since the Gunn brothers last met, and while Brother Lee insisted he was hanging in there, it was obvious he wasn't, claiming his shaking came from being scared and shivering in the cold rather than being fine. Brother Lee finally confessed that he had been starving himself by drinking only water, since there was no food left. When the donation drive hit its peak, he gave most of his supplies to the committee, and by the time the snowstorm finally ended, he had nothing left. On top of that, the committee handed out way too little food, and if Brother Lee had guessed how terrible the storm would get, he would have saved some of his own extra supplies for later. Seeing a way to help Brother Lee, Hanfeng grabbed the gangster and leaned in close to whisper a special request. Brother Lee stared in shock as little Hanfeng insisted on giving him only 4 packs of instant noodles and 2 sausages for the simple job, warning that it would eat up all his supplies. The gangster saw his little brother offering food as a perfect excuse to show his love, and he was so touched by the kindness that he promised to never forget it. Brother Lee seized Hanfeng with a warm, determined grip and promised to sweep up this little trouble without making a scene, while casually suggesting they just drop by Han Fang's place later for a bite to eat. But first, Brother Lee had to find food, so he joined the line to get his ration. Han Fang was thrilled about his clever deal, which meant he could save time by sending just a few packs of noodles and sausages to gather information from now on. He felt a bit bad for Brother Lee, but nosing into other people's business wasn't worth giving up his comfy spot on the sofa, the delicious food, or the fun games. If Han Fang hadn't been caught by another old friend, his ride through the underground parking lot would have been flawless. The moment he heard his name called, a palm shot toward his face, landing a sharp slap on Han Fang's cheek as Lee Haya's unique hello for the day. He wasn't ready for an attack this early, so he didn't know how to handle this crazy situation. Haya's eyes burned with anger as she told Han Fang he had failed her. Then she screamed at him for ignoring her pleas for food. She lifted her voice so loud that everyone in the parking lot could hear her. Han Fang stood frozen in shock, staring ahead as he tried to make sense of the crazy scene around him. The witch he had been messing with just slapped him across the face in front of everyone. He hadn't even paid off her old debts yet, and now she's barging into his life to slap him for no reason at all. This was sacrilege, and as his rage surged, he felt certain Lee Hyona still thought he was nothing but a weakling who could be pushed around. He stayed quiet while she screamed at him for not answering, calling him deaf and mute until he finally had to respond. Han Fang took a deep breath as the cold air filled with smoke. He then put on a new act, sincerely apologizing to Hyona and claiming his supplies had been stolen. He put the food he was delivering outside his door for just a moment to grab his keys, only to find the boxes gone when he returned. And though Han Feng searched for the person who took them, he found no clues at all. By now, she looked like a junkie begging for her next fix, asking him if he had any supplies left. He told me he had very little left, just enough food to last him a few days if he ate only one meal each day. When he mentioned there was food left, Hyona's wild face instantly brightened with a blushing smile, and she switched back to her sweet girl act so perfectly it was flawless. When she begged Han Feng to share his food and go on 2 days without eating so they could survive the disaster together, he looked like a madman. Han Feng couldn't even stand how shameless this woman was, and it was terrifying that she could say such selfish things without even flinching. She saw him only as a tool to use when she needed him, and nothing else. Han Feng smiled and lovingly agreed to the plan, letting her keep thinking that way. He acted like a man who kept his word and shared his supplies with the girl, even when she demanded food immediately, because he insisted he had to pack things up before sending it that night. She playfully told him she'd be waiting for his message tonight, then headed back with a quick wish for his health before the flu could strike. Han Feng said his sad goodbye, while a dark and sneaky plan was already growing in his small, selfish mind. By 8 o'clock in the evening, Lai Hyona was already pestering Han Feng to give her food. She grew so fed up that by 9:30, she was shivering alone in the cold hallways downstairs, only to find Han Feng back to his old trick of pretending to care before ghosting her again. After weeks of freezing cold with no one fixing it, the elevator finally gave up and stopped working. If she truly wanted to make a scene, she'd have to climb the stairs all the way to Han Feng's apartment. Lee Hyona swallowed her pride and climbed the creepy staircase because she had no other choice. Halfway up the mountain, she was already tired and shivering from the cold, making the climb feel like a nightmare that only the supplies were keeping her going. She was so tired from going without food for days that climbing the stairs felt like using up every last drop of strength she had. You have to admire her, because very few people would climb more than 16 floors just to steal food, and it just so happened that the emergency lights on those higher floors were all broken too. That only pushed her into the darker, spookier parts. Lee Hyona trembled when she heard a spooky noise and frantically called out to see who was there. To answer her question, a black plastic bag dropped from above and was about to crash on her small head, leaving Hona frozen in shock as she waited for the impact. The moment the bag crashed down with a loud bang, the emergency lights flickered back on and white dust filled the stairs. The always cheerful Lee Hyona got covered in flour from head to toe after Han Feng rushed over with supplies, only to accidentally drop the bag when the lights went out. Hyona brushed the flour and plastic from her hair and coat, but the nasty person underneath kept peeking through her fake smile. Han Feng felt great about the sight since he had just finished making a mean prank for her that was still in progress. He picked up another plastic bag and told the witch he had packed all his last supplies for her. When she looked closer, she saw that almost all the food and fruit had turned to mold, looking like garbage instead of something to eat. Han Feng pretended to be a fool by scratching his head and claiming he worked overtime to stockpile leftovers, even though some of the meat was already rotting. He smoothly switched to acting hurt, snatching the plastic bag and saying she had to hand it over if she didn't like it. Terrified of another day without food, the witch snatched the bag away, insisting it belonged to her. Hanfeng studied her from head to toe before shaking his head and laughing at himself. Right before his eyes stood the goddess he had chased so hard. Right now, she looked like a homeless person shivering on a freezing winter night, digging through a trash bag to find something edible in the moldy pile. She even greedily snatched the last bag of flour right out of Hanfeng's hand. Lai Hyona was still celebrating her half bag of flour, not caring that she'd just been sprayed with it. She vanished without a word, leaving Hanfeng unbothered since feeding the witch's actual trash was a perfect way to give her some serious stomach trouble. Showering was out of the question in this weather, so she'd have to march around with those sticky flowers clinging to her skin for a while. As Hanfeng happily made his way home, he suddenly sensed something strange in the background and pretended not to notice the shadow moving behind him. Hanfeng stayed calm and acted like nothing was wrong as he left the stairs and headed to his unit. Just a moment later, a shadowy figure began trailing right behind him. They had to be a person because of the snow boots on their feet. Hanfeng used the element of surprise, darted out from behind the door, and tackled the stranger following him. He lunged at the mysterious stranger, pinned them hard to the ground, and held them there. Just as Hanfeng was about to punch the guy spying on him, something made him stop and his anger vanished. The person following him was a girl with messy hair, sleepy eyes, and very thick glasses. Hanfeng knew she was here so late for only one reason. She must be spying on him, and our hero wanted to find out her plans. But all he got back was silence and a blank stare from behind her glasses, showing she wasn't one for a chat. Silence hung between them as Hanfeng, taken aback by her quietness, stepped up his game with heavier words to try and make her speak. He promised to rip off her coat right there in the freezing cold if she didn't speak. Even that didn't make her talk, so Hanfeng grew bored of teasing her and finally let her go. Next time, she might not get the same help if she watches him. She had to quit her quiet play and rush home before she got too cold. Just as our hero was ready to go, he suddenly felt a hand reach out and pull on his sleeve. The quiet girl wasn't about to let him leave so easily, even though Hanfeng had no idea what she wanted from him. While she just stared at him in silence, Hanfeng demanded she stop looking and threatened to kick her out if she didn't say what she wanted. Instead of speaking, she pointed at something and dragged our hero along, and even the clumsy Hanfeng saw that she was showing him something. They walked into her room. The room was so warm and bright that our hero stood there completely speechless. He scanned the room and saw stacks of boxes, some empty and mixed with trash, yet it was amazing that this girl had so much food weeks after the world ended, making him wonder if she had planned ahead. Hanfeng straight up asked if she knew the ice apocalypse was coming, and surprisingly, she finally answered. Even though her words were odd, she had actually done the math herself and found a result that predicted a future ice age. She turned out to be the strange person from the community chat who had warned about the ice age apocalypse before it started, leaving Hanfeng confused since he couldn't believe a simple person could predict the future through research. And he was right. She had finally shown him the real reason. The girl's room was filled with screens showing live feeds from security cameras. And everywhere, our hero was there. In the very first clip, he was stuffing his nose while balancing a heavy stack of boxes in an elevator. On the second day, a delivery driver was carrying a dozen gas cans into his room. On the third day, Brother Lee handed him a gun case and other things. It turns out Hanfeng's first guess about the girl was right. She had been spying on him for a long time. She felt so comfortable, she didn't hesitate to change her warm winter clothes right before him, since her room was too hot. Hanfeng still stumbled and wrongly asked why she suddenly decided to take her clothes off, so she just said it was hot, but he clearly meant something else. Why is she doing this right in front of me? I ordered her to stop right now and get her pants back on. Finally, even though he didn't want to, he had to take off his coat too. The girl held dangerous secrets that kept him trapped until they were solved. So Hanfeng figured she was spying on him because she doubted his early supplies run, but luckily she only wanted to test if he was smart enough to work with her, not to hold him for ransom. Now, she just had to figure out what cooperation really meant to her. Since speaking was hard for her, she chose to show him the way as they went, making sure he understood everything in his own special way. Hanfeng couldn't even guess what she'd do next with those sudden moves. As she pulled the generator from behind the bed, it turned out she wasn't trying to hurt Hanfeng, but rather beg him to teach her how to use it, since she was a computer genius who had forgotten the simple survival skills needed to stay alive. After a bit of time, the hydrogen-powered generator was humming quietly, and we'll pretend that running it inside the room wasn't a terrible idea. Hanfeng thought she was finally done asking, but she wasn't. Her blue eyes begged for help once more. This time, our hero quickly hooked up the hot water boiler. So thanks to the generator, she'll have hot water all day long. But Hanfeng still warned her to be careful and remember to turn off the tap. Next, she asked for help with the refrigerator, which was a total mess, so our hero had to teach her that raw meat belongs in the freezer, not the fridge, or it will spoil, and she also had to keep everything clean or she'd get sick, because he wasn't going to do all this for her. She had to do it herself. Hanfang couldn't fathom how she'd survived this long without knowing these simple things, so he had to show her how to swap and hook up the gas cans to the stove, while she had to remember the safety rules and mimic every move he made. Things only got more complicated from there, as Hanfang had to teach her how to cook and roast food on the fire. And when our hero was finally completely exhausted, a delicious dinner was ready, and he told her to eat it while it was still hot. He still couldn't make sense of ending up babysitting an adult child all day, because his new friend just couldn't take care of herself anymore. She didn't look embarrassed a bit, but the dinner was simply too delicious. Hanfang saw there was no point in arguing, so he awkwardly slipped away by claiming it was all just a joke. He was so exhausted from the day that all he wanted was to crawl into his warm bed. It turns out he wasn't the only one exhausted, and when he looked over, the girl had already fallen asleep with a food table serving as her bed. So even though Hanfang had never seen anyone nap while eating, he gently carried her to her own bed. Who'd have guessed he'd end up spending the whole day teaching a kid? Through the night, the snow kept falling harder and the cold grew even deeper. Hanfang barely opened his eyes when guests were already pushing to get his attention. It was the same girl again, bringing so many gifts to thank him that even our hero was surprised by her kindness. Once Hanfang walked away with the boxes, she stayed right at the door, refusing to budge, giving him that familiar look that meant she wanted another favor. She brought a generator and asked Hanfang to teach her again since she hadn't learned yesterday's lessons, so after a few days of talking, he realized she was completely useless when it came to survival. She was also completely out of her mind, not knowing the difference between what was right and what was wrong. But she refused to quit. So every single day, she pulled Hanfang into her room to show him how to survive. After a while, she finally managed to cook something almost edible, a skill Hanfang thought was a big deal because before that, even dogs wouldn't touch it. But in this frozen world, people would fight over a plate like it was gold. After a long wait, Hanfang finally decided to ask the girl her name. She stepped forward and said her name was Jo Shingon. Hanfang couldn't figure out why she acted so strangely, but he refused to leave her alone while chaos erupted downstairs as hungry residents fought over the last of their food. Chaos poured down like rain, and people started stealing supplies from one another, fighting over who owned what, while the weak collapsed and the strong grabbed everything they could, proving that the quiet days of the community are finally over. People were fighting over things they thought were theirs to keep. They clung to their meager stolen goods so tightly that anyone trying to take them would only end up in a blind, bloody fight. These people kept punching and kicking each other without mercy until their fists and shoes were covered in blood. While everyone rushed to push civilization into ruin, Mr. Jang stayed perfectly calm as the storm raged around him. He cranked the megaphone's volume to a deafening roar, silencing the fight and forcing everyone to cover their ears in pain, proving Bro was a real sonic supervillain. After a few seconds of hearing the grating feedback, Mr. Jang finally spoke to the surviving group, asking if they were tired of the fighting, then lifted a badly beaten man to show that wasting their last few supplies was not just reckless, but truly foolish. The crowd remained furious because Mr. Jang had set up the donation system, leaving them with only a few noodles every few days, so if they weren't dying in battle, they were starving to death. Mr. Jang acted like he was hearing their shouts about the unfair sharing of resources. Then he stepped up to do his job. If they're fighting over such silly things, maybe they deserve to starve to death, Mr. Jang asked who started all this trouble and told everyone to think hard, but the angry crowd just pointed the finger right at him. He grabbed a piece of bread and began his magic to help the people remember the truth. Bread that used to cost just a few dollars could now be bought for tens or even hundreds of dollars from people with plenty of money. The elite pressed the unlucky ones so hard they had to cut a single slice of bread into 5 or 10 tiny bits just to sell them off. While some used the disaster to get rich, the people stuck in the basement car park had long since run out of money and hope. But now they were fighting with each other because the system that once worked was causing their problems. While the powerful held back their food and hoarded riches, raising prices with cruel intent, ordinary people fought each other just to survive. Yet here the poor were starving and fighting to the death, and Mr. Jang asked if that was fair. Feeling the crowd was finally listening, Mr. Jang shouted for everyone to stop, stand together, and reclaim what rightfully belonged to them all. These hungry, angry people began to convince themselves that the news they just heard was proof they were being treated unfairly. Why did the wealthy grab all the rewards while everyone else just fought to avoid dying of hunger? Jang watched the puzzle pieces click together on their own after he planted a seed of hate in the people's minds. The crowd's anger wasn't aimed at the survivors, who only wanted their fair share, but at the rest of the building's tenants. As Mr. Jang watched the violence, chaos, and desperation bubble up, he gave a quiet smirk. While things were falling apart, homeless Joe, who everyone called Brother Lee, could be spotted in the mess. Of everyone in the room, he alone could see the truth behind that speech, knowing the crowd was losing their minds and disaster was coming. So he had to rush to tell Han Feng right away. In Han Feng's room, he was lying around pretending to read a book while snoring until his phone's ringtone woke him up. He got text from Brother Lee about the trouble starting in the basement car park. With Mr. Young constantly pushing them, the people began snatching resources from everyone, creeping door to door to pry open locks. These raiders were armed and ready to cause harm, so Brother Lee told Han Feng to hide instead of facing these crazies head-on. All he could do was hope that homeless Joe would be okay out there. Han Feng didn't see this coming, and even though he bought 2 guns just in case, the thought of ever pointing them at another person made him feel sick. If the people had teamed up and found out his secrets, they would have hunted him down and eaten him alive. So he had to get ready for anything that could happen. For now, he grabbed a pile of wires, tools, and a few fire extinguishers from the stockroom. He used this junk to make his door dangerous by tying live wires to the knob, thinking it would keep people out. After building his clunky machine, Han Feng carefully unrolled the wire across the floor. Just as he started his little test, the lights flickered out and everything went dark. Looking down, it was obvious that every building in the area had lost power all at once. Some folks tried to reach management, but they've been trying to talk to them for a long time. Han Feng knew that with the snowstorm getting worse and everyone using so much electricity to stay warm, the power would go out sooner or later anyway. The snow piled up everywhere, and the freezing cold outside made it impossible for anyone to fix things. Looking at everything, it seems this time the power is gone for good and the signal is lost forever. When the folks knew the power would never return again, they knew their days were just about to get worse. If their panic sparks a bigger rebellion, then the real nightmare is about to start. Just 30 minutes before the lights went out, the witch Lee Hyona was stuffing herself with noodles. Her wealthy sponsor was boasting about how he once paid 50 times the normal price for resources, and the poor folks had no choice but to keep quiet and sell. With plenty of supplies on hand, Blondie only spent $500,000, then started holding auctions where the poor scrambled for scraps, a trick that made him rich. He ran his hand alongside Lee Hyona's face and asked if she thought she had made the right decision.